was like a punch in the gut. It knocked the wind right out of me, he said. Knocked the wind out of me and made me want to turn around and march right back to that boat I left on the sand to follow him in the first place. Peter was shocked and confused and angry because the path that we saw Jesus following step by step looked so clear. The way we knew when he called us, the way he spoke with this authority, healing after healing, one confrontation with evil after the next. It was amazing what Jesus was doing, and we couldn't help but talk about it at night, wondering, was he the one? More than just a teacher, was he the turning point we had been waiting for? More than the rest of us, Peter seemed like the confident one, right? He was always the first to jump in with both feet. Sure, Jesus, come to my house, Jesus. Stick your head in, say hello to my sick mother-in-law, Jesus. Sure. Peter was the one to get up and chase Jesus down when he'd gone off alone. Peter was the one to ask those questions that were on all of our minds, but we were afraid to ask. Peter was the one who bumped over and made room for Levi the tax collector when Jesus started accumulating followers that were a little questionable. Peter was the first one to pick up the basket when Jesus said, sure, hand out these couple of loaves and fish, everyone will eat. Peter was always the one to jump in with both feet. So it's not surprising that Peter was the one who would pipe up with that word that we're all whispering. When Jesus asks, who do you say that I am? He said it, Messiah. And Jesus did not say no. Jesus did not say no. So immediately after that, when Jesus says, guess what's coming? Suffering and death. Well, of course, Peter is the one to take him aside. Peter is the one to try to encourage him, to boost him up. Jesus, cheer up. Get out of this funk. Remind Jesus that the Messiah has a beautiful, glorious road ahead. And Jesus called him Satan for trying to protect him. Satan! It was like a punch in the gut, Peter said. I really wasn't sure he was going to be there the next morning. He was there, but he was quiet. And Peter is not quiet. He was angry. He was hurt. He was confused like I am. Afraid that we've given all this up to follow Jesus, and he seems like the one, and he's also terrifying us. Peter didn't look Jesus in the eye for that whole week. 6 days. He couldn't make eye contact. It's so hard to know. So hard to really feel sure. Jesus looks like the Messiah. He seems really certain, though, that he's headed into something I don't want to be a part of. And after 6 days of this, when Jesus asked Peter to go up the mountain, I didn't think he'd go. I was surprised he went along. I don't know what happened up there with James and Peter, Jesus and Peter, James and John. I don't know what happened up there, but it was something. They were all so quiet the next day. And quiet is not Peter, but it was a different kind of quiet. He was a little more settled somehow. I'd sure like to know if maybe Jesus explained it all up there, or they figured something out, because it's still hard to put it all together. Peter is still the guy who goes first while the rest of us hang back. That part hasn't changed. Jesus is still bringing up these things that make us sick to hear about: suffering, death. We don't like it, and we don't know what to do with it. But Peter, I watch him, and sometimes in the middle of it all, he'll just kind of close his eyes. I take a breath, and I wonder what he is seeing. What it is that he seems to be hanging onto so carefully. Those moments of assurance, those experiences of God where words fail us, we can't order them up, can we? We can't predict them. And as much as I imagine you join me in hungering for them, treasuring them, moments when we get a little glimpse of God's glory are equal parts terror and joy, right? Peter doesn't know what to say. We want this blinding confirmation that, yes, this is the one. Jesus is more even than the Messiah you expect. This is the beloved Son of God, something to hang on to. As Jesus' path unfolds, still doesn't look right. This is something for Peter to hang on to as Jesus keeps on talking about suffering and death. And that voice says, listen to him. We can't schedule those moments of awe when there's nothing to be said. Much as we pursue them, we can't create those moments where God silences us and says, listen. It's funny because the disciples have been operating in this sense of wondering and assuming that Jesus is this Messiah, but it doesn't look right. And then when they get up top of the mountain and it looks right, it looks like the glory of God shining out, God doesn't say, see? God says, listen to him. And Jesus goes right on immediately coming down the mountain talking about how suffering and death are the path for the Messiah, the Son of God. Listen to him. Listen to him. Those words that I listen for when I come are, this is my body given for you. For me, those are the words that I come to hear no matter what else is going on. Because as followers of Jesus, the truth is we spend our time just like Jesus' disciples, following in hope, having seen something in Jesus that has changed us, and baffled by how the world looks so different from the kingdom that got initiated there in Jesus' death and resurrection. It can be hard to live like we're sure that Jesus is this sign of God's faithfulness. In the midst of all of the confusion, a Messiah whose path does not look like it should, that same Jesus really shining with the radiance of God, God says, listen to him. This is my blood shed for you. I don't get glimpses of glory when I order them up, but I come every week hoping for those words. Jesus says, this is me here, now, for you. No matter how the world looks today, no matter how I feel, no matter whether there are squirrely little ones at the railing or shaking hands that spill a bit of the wine, Jesus says it. This is my own self, tangibly here for you today. Peter and John and James, they got a little preview on the mountain, a little glimpse of the end of the story breaking in, and they could see through their squinting what victory over sin and death and the devil looks like in the flesh. We gather around this table for a preview. Sometimes use that language, a foretaste of the feast to come. This little snitch of the heavenly banquet, again and again, tangible assurance that despite all appearances, the risen Christ is present, and the risen Christ changes us, changes the world. So I don't know what your particular piety around communion is. We have this way of receiving communion that kind of keeps us moving along, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to all be gathered together and see each other coming and going, but there's not an actual cattle prod. You can stay for a moment. You can close your eyes, take that breath, and hang on to that little glimpse. be to God.